I work at a video game store. You name it, we got it. Anything from Intellivision to PS3 can be bought in our store, and we buy used games as well. I've always been into haunted games, especially old ones, but there's something about your favorite classics becoming glitched and evil that interests me. And as morbid as that sounds, I get a little shot of adrenaline while reading creepypastas, especially Pokemon ones, since I grew up with Red and Blue. So today a customer walked in holding a red Game Boy cartridge, and I knew immediately what it was, despite the fact that it didn't have a label. He strolled up to the counter and placed the cartridge down in front of me. I was wondering how much I could get for this. I don't know which game it is exactly, since it doesn't have a label, and I hope that's okay. My doorbell rang today, and when I opened it, nobody was there. This cartridge was just sitting on the doorstep. Maybe some kid was playing a prank and accidentally dropped it or something. Kind of odd, but I don't really have any use for it, and my son is into newer games. He seemed like a nice guy, so I smiled and said, "No problem, I can give you $20 for that." I gave the man his money and he left. Once the coast was clear, I opened the door to the back room and sat down in a chair. I had an old Game Boy in there that was meant to be up in the cabinets in the front, but I preferred to use it when no one was around. I popped the game in, although there was only a couple other people working in the store today. If anyone saw me, I could just say I was testing it, which was partly true. But to be honest, this game had a really creepy vibe, and I wanted to try it out. The game took longer to load than usual, and there was no Meteorano and Gengar introduction, but I didn't pay any mind. It was pretty odd after all, so it might be a bit glitchy. Finally, I got to the opening screen. Instead of Red standing next to the Pokemon that were cycling through, there was a man in a black cloth holding a scythe. And I assumed that he was the Grim Reaper. At the top of the screen, the words Pokemon Dead version are written in what looked like blood. Not the normal text, but I could hardly contain my excitement. I had found a hacked game! Eagerly, I pressed the start button and was given the regular options of continue and new game. Usually my curiosity would have gotten the better of me and would have checked the previous guy's file, but I didn't want any spoilers, so I selected new game. But I was startled by the response. No. No. No what? I rubbed my head in frustration. I can't even start a new game? I pressed A. Life does not have a new game. You can't just play again. We are forced to continue until the end journey ends. Somewhat morbid, I thought, but this was a game called Pokemon Dead version, so I wasn't surprised. I selected continue and was thrown into the game. Surprisingly, it was at the beginning anyway. And so I listened to the whole Professor Oak speech, which was somewhat different from what I remembered. Instead of the whole living together in harmony with Pokemon thing, he frowned and said, Pokemon are used to our advantage. In the game that is life, they are our own pawns. Use them carefully. With that, he went back to his usual ditzy self, forgetting the name of his grandson and whatnot. I tried to enter my name as Red, which was what I usually chose, but I was forced to be named, which I found a little strange. When I was promoted to enter my rival's name, I decided to be unoriginal and call him Douche, remembering that encountering him and had always been the comedic highlight in the game when I had played it as a child. However, upon entering the name, my rival said, "Try again, loser. That's not my name." I frowned and simply named him Blue, to which he replied, "I hate you already." Finally, it was time for us to pick our Pokemon. I decided to pick Charmander, and surprisingly, the game had no problem with it. Blue decided to be his usual douchey self and pick Water. I checked the stats and moves of my Charmander, and they were all normal, except for one move. It was called Reap. The usual battle with Blue occurred, and I found that I was unable to use Reap on his Pokemon. What a creepy move, I thought. I defeated his Squirtle with ease, however, and eventually I defeated his Squirtle with... Squirrel. It's a Squirtle turtle. Squirrel turtle. I defeated his Squirtle with ease, however, and eventually headed out into Route 1. I found a trainer along the road and discovered that I was able to use Reap on his Pokemon. A text box saying, "The foe's Rattata had its soul drained," popped up, and the enemy sprite faded away. He didn't drop off the screen, but simply faded. The trainer had another Pokemon, but the battle ended anyway. Afterwards, a small scene played in which he appeared to be crying. He simply said, "Sob," and then faded away himself. This went on the same way for much of the first part of the game. Usually I didn't use Reap because I found it too morbid and creepy, and also I wanted to level up my other Pokemon. But occasionally I would use it out of curiosity. However, the same thing would also pop up. "The foe's Pidgey had its soul drained." Then the sprites of both the Pokemon and its crying trainer would fade off the screen. And if the trainer had more useful Pokemon, strangely, Reap did not work on wild Pokemon, and a message saying, "Doesn't seem to affect the wild..." There's a blank space. Trying to fill in the blank here. What's a good wild Pokemon? Master it. "It doesn't seem to affect the wild Ponyta," would appear, so I was forced to catch some other Pokemon in order to get a decent team going. Plus, it was just more fun that way. Just before Pewter City, I checked my Pokemon to see how their stats were doing when I noticed that my Charmander's name had been changed. I never preferred to name my Pokemon, so it was a bit of a shock to me. Charmander's name had become King. I checked my other Pokemon and discovered that their names had all been changed to Pawn. Every single one of them. I figured it was just another part of the game and let it be, though I didn't much care for the new names. The game continued like any other Pokemon game would, with the exception of Reap, my Pokemon's random name change, and the occasional sobbing trainer. I then arrived in Pewter City for my first gym bout. Brock pretty much introduced himself as usual, though right before the battle he said, "Your king! There sure looks strong. Your king there sure looks strong." There's a grammar mistake in that somewhere. Your king sure looks strong. But will he win in the game of fate? or will he suffer like the rest? The battle then began. Much to my dismay, I could not switch out King for any other Pokemon or use any of its other moves. I basically had to sit there while Brock's Pokemon kicked the crap out of mine. Once I had 1 hit point left, Brock appeared and said, "Check," with a smug look on his face. Just as I thought I was doomed, the game suddenly took control and King used Reap. Brock's Pokemon faded away and the battle ended. There was a scene suddenly, in which Brock confronted me and said, "You can't cheat life, nor can you cheat fate. All of this will come back to haunt you." And with that, he disappeared. Similar events with all the other gym leaders continued throughout the game. Though the game was cut down to be considerably shorter, there were 4 gym leaders instead of 8, and instead of the Elite 4 at the end of the game, there was simply Blue, the one who had hated me from the beginning. It should be noted here that since our fight at the beginning of the game, I had not seen Blue since then, and scenes and battles with him had been cut out. By now, King was level 62, and all of my pawns were reasonably underleveled. Red and Blue simply stood there in the empty room for a moment, and then Blue began to pace towards Red. Slowly at first, and then quite quickly. When they were very close to each other, a text box came up saying, "It looks like you and King have become good friends." I pressed A. Or have you? What have you gained from killing people together instead of just fighting your battles fair and square? Your greed is inhuman. I had a goal and I went for it. And you, striving for the same thing, hurt people to get what you wanted. Is that what you call honorable? With that, a battle began. And I found that much like the earlier gym battles, I was unable to do anything but sit there and let him beat me. But on his first move, he selected a move that I thought was impossible for him to have. Reap. I had it all along, a text box came up, but I never used it, not once. It would have been wrong. But you don't see that. His Blastoise, suddenly named Winner, reared up and began to use the move. And a cackling evil sound began to come out of the game. "I'll see you in hell." The game then turned itself off. I tried to turn it on again, but the only thing would appear was a text box with the same bloody lettering that was there at the beginning. Checkmate.